All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Geopolitics in Conflict show. How are you, Elizabeth?
I'm doing great. I'm glad to be back with everybody.
Good, good. Mine is I pulled the muscle, went to the
Ah,
golfing range on this weekend, so I guess I'm paying the price for not doing it regularly. A couple years
yeah.
ago, I used to go on a weekly basis. I would play. I slacked off, and that's usually not me. But anyway,
Well,
as
you
you
know
can
what?
survive,
How
as you
did
can
you
survive.
do? I think the question is, how did you do?
I didn't play. I just went to the range. No,
You
no, no,
didn't
no,
play?
no, 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 no,
Oh,
no. And I won't play. I like to go range few times.
uh-huh.
Golf is one of those perishable skills.
Yeah.
If you don't keep up with it,
Yeah,
you will
absolutely.
lose it. So I need
Absolutely.
to start to go more often. But anyway, I'll be fine and I'll survive. So all right, all right. We're gonna have a great conversation and great show for you guys today. It's because the nature of the topic we're gonna be talking about. More than one topic, I believe, right? What
Yep.
are the
So we have three topics that we've got going today. And the first one is Victoria Nuland's trip to South Africa ahead of the Brics summit.
ah
And why is that important? Not only why is that important, but who actually is Victoria Nuland? Because we have our politicians that we have elected, and we know who they are. But Victoria Nuland's been one of the people that's been behind the scenes in more than one conflict.
oh yeah.
And so, who exactly is she, and why is she going to South Africa ahead of the BRICS summit? What could she possibly be doing there?
Yeah.
And it's not something that is it's not something that's being talked about here in the US at all. To even hear about it, it's just like one line. Oh, Victoria Nuland is going to South Africa ahead of the BRICS summit. Well, okay, but why? What does she have going on there? So that's our first topic. The second topic is the BRICS currency. So ahead of this summit in South Africa, the thing that's on everyone's mind is the new BRICS currency. But what is it? We don't even have a name for it. And how exactly is it going to be tied to gold? Because is it going to be worth an ounce of gold? What is
Yeah.
this really? Because we don't have a lot of information on it, which I assume we're going to get in in the summit. But we don't, right as of right now, we have a lot of talk about it, but we don't have a lot of actual information. And then the last one is that Russia's got some very interesting things going on in terms of energy right now.
Yeah.
And they themselves also have instituted a digital currency. And so we're going to talk about what is going on in Russia, especially considering the grain deal that just fell through. Why did it fall through? What is sort of Russia's bigger plan in terms of
Energy,
energy?
yeah.
Because that's Russia's biggest chip, right? Its biggest playing chip is that
Yeah.
Russia is a very oil and natural
It's
resource
energy
rich
resources.
country.
Yes.
Right,
A
right,
lot. A lot. That's why Europe was benefiting from Russia's energy, and we kind of
right.
wanted to limit that so we can keep Europe under our thumb. This
Absolutely.
is what most people do not understand about the Ukraine conflict.
Mhm.
That's what it's at the heart of it.
Yeah.
So that's what we're going to be talking about. So,
You mean it's not spreading democracy?
oh no, no, it is,
Ah,
it is, but
oh,
it
okay,
is this
okay,
saying,
okay,
of
okay.
course, everything has to fall under the banner
Right.
of
Right. They're
democracy,
spreading
which we've been
democracy.
doing for the last 3 or 4 decades.
Yep.
Now things coming up to the surface, sort of we're seeing the true nature and true face of really what this
Right.
democracy is all about. So that's what we're going to be talking about. Before we launch into this, I want to disclose something here that I know I've been getting a lot of comments or requests, whatever, regarding the foreign minister of China. Why did he disappear
Mm.
for a whole month?
Yes.
So,
I think that's very important.
yeah, it's basically he's been let go this morning, which was yesterday, China time, officially.
Mhm.
Mr. Wang Yi now is going to take over again because Wang Yi used to be the foreign minister. He's a well-seasoned guy.
Yeah.
He knows. His name is Chan Kang. I hope I pronounce it correctly. Was let go. Now there were some speculations about his health. You know, we
Well,
don't know. We don't know.
yeah.
They have their own internal dynamics. I am certain something happened inside. The
I'm sure.
decision the good thing about is that the decision was made.
Yeah.
That's what matters. Because if China would have not made decision, it will look very, very, very bad when it comes down to optics. Because you
Absolutely.
can't leave a post like that vacant for that long.
Right.
So, but anyway, that case now is closed officially. That he is being, I don't know if fired or just let go, whatever term you want to use.
Yeah.
He's no longer there. Mr. Wang Yi now took over, and case is closed, and they're going to move forward. I'm sure they're going to nominate someone else
Yeah.
because Mr. Wang Yi is now the chief diplomat. But for now, he's the one managing the foreign affairs and all this stuff.
Well,
So
and I'm sure that there's some kind of juicy story going on behind the scenes.
we would never
but,
know. It's
we
because
don't know.
those are very internal,
Right.
very, very internal to the
Right.
point of being too sensitive. And there is no way, not just in China, because if we had the same thing, it would be the same
Oh,
for
of course,
us.
of course.
If it was in Russia, if it is in any other country, those kind of nature of issues won't come out.
Yeah.
Now, you can think about it as one, maybe it's disagreements on policy. But if it is disagreement on policy, won't lead to the point of being fired.
Yeah.
If you challenging the boss, well, if you challenging the boss logically and sort of pragmatically,
Yeah.
it won't be smart of the boss to fire you if you are asking the right questions.
Right.
That's one
Right.
thing. That's why we want, and I can't speculate, because I don't know.
Yeah.
But that's at least what I got, is that I knew about. I didn't talk about it much for the last 2 weeks or so.
Mhm.
It's because I wasn't certain about it.
Yeah.
And my rule is, if I don't have information that is confirmed, I don't speak of it.
And I think
The
that
bottom line.
I think that's part
how-
of what makes us different is,
Yes. Yeah.
we are not the news.
No. No, I don't.
It's-
I don't do that kind of stuff. I don't have time for that.
Well,
We
and-
analyze the information.
Exactly.
Yeah, we don't do that,
Exactly.
so.
Well, and honestly, you can get thrown the news all day long, but if you have no context to put the news in, it doesn't make
No.
much sense. So
That's
analysis
true.
is the name of the game.
That's true.
And for you guys, I mean, we challenge you to also analyze what you're seeing, because just, paying attention or reading headlines, it's not going to give you a real picture of what's happening around the world.
That's true. So, by the way, guys, if this is your first time landing here, please make sure to subscribe. I will really appreciate it. And I also want to give you a heads up about the upcoming course. I had a conversation with one of our production team regarding the course 2 days ago. I'm very excited about it. It's
Cool.
because of that. I don't know. You're the one in charge of it all. How it's gonna be, whether in segments, I don't know. All I know is when I'm given the green light to sit in front of camera and talk about that, something that I know about. But I was very excited because of the nature of really breaking down as to what the government is all about.
Yep.
So, and this has nothing to do with just you being an American. Everybody can
Absolutely.
learn from this one. So I'm excited about that. It's coming.
Yes.
I'm sure you'll put.
Yes, it's
your
the government
post.
course, guys. It's coming. I know we've been talking about it for a little while, but we needed to make sure that it was really high quality for you guys.
Yes.
So we've been putting it together for a while, but the reality is that the way that most people think the US government works is not actually how it works,
Never works.
including Americans. I think Americans
yeah.
really don't understand. And there's the textbook version, right? Like, oh, this is this branch and this is this branch.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really work that way. And as we're about to dive into Victoria Nuland, I think that that's a really great example of how it doesn't actually work that way. And so we have the version of the US government that's being fed to people across the globe, no matter where you are. There's a version of the US government that's being fed to people.
Yeah.
And then there's really what's happening.
Yeah.
So we wanted to give you guys that, because as we've traveled globally, as we've talked to you guys, it is shocking to see how many people really don't know the inner workings of the US government, whether you're in the US or not.
Before I forget, since you mentioned the word travel globally, are we
Mhm.
still planning on trip to China, right?
I don't know. Somebody's got to reach out to us about that.
Anyway, so let's dive into our topic. It's a very serious in a
Mhm.
sense of understanding the dynamics of it. And again, the way I believe, at least from my end, the way I will analyze this trip and think about it is in terms of a parallel or parallels to what took place before,
Yeah.
historically speaking. You could go back to, for example, the invasion of Iraq.
Right.
And this will lead us to at least bring a brief description of or about who Victoria
Who
Nuland is,
Victoria Nuland is.
but
Yes.
without spending too much time because there's too much to cover
Right.
regarding the future plans instead of the
Right.
past.
Well, she's been around for a while.
She's been in State Department for
Mhm.
quite a while, indeed. The one thing that a lot of people did not know is that back during the invasion of Iraq,
Hmm.
because how the whole invasion of Iraq came about,
Yeah.
as you may know, it was about based on a faulty analysis. The faulty analysis was by design,
Yeah.
and all this triggered from the Iraq building weapons of mass destructions and all that stuff.
Mhm.
So what the administration at that time ended up doing is sending none other than Wilson. Wilson used to be a former U.S. ambassador.
Mhm.
Well, usually when you are at that position, you're supposed to have the accuracy and pragmatism and so forth. Wilson took a trip to Niger at
Mhm.
that time. And why did he go to Niger? He went to Niger to find out if the so-called yellow cake, well, the yellow cake is the one that is
Right.
the
Uranium.
uranium that
Yep.
is used for the bombs and so forth. So one to Niger, and I'm just shortening all this because
Right.
without it's a long.
You're shortening a very, very
Yeah,
long.
we need
long
about 10 hours
process.
for this. Anyway, came back, briefed the Congress that it was no record or indication that it was a transfer of yellow cake. So, how did the administration back then under the Bush responded? They
Mhm.
retaliated. How did they retaliate? Wilson's wife, Valerie Plame, used to be a CIA agent undercover.
Mhm.
They blew up her cover, which is
Oh my
very
god.
because the
Oh
problem with
no.
that, as you may know, how
Oh
the intelligence, as
no.
one who worked in Washington D.C. and I had my dealings with the intelligence community,
Mhm.
without going any further than this.
Oh no.
Anytime you blow up the cover of an agent, you are not only putting the agents at risk, but you put in his or her assets.
Yeah.
In her case, what makes it very concerning is that she had assets all over the world, including those in Asia.
Oh no.
So, this is why, if you notice the statements of the CIA director
Mhm.
about rebuilding the spinal network in China, which will not
Mhm.
work anyway. Chinese are very good at this
Yeah,
also.
yeah.
And there was some, I had an article, I wrote something about that, and
Mhm.
I got an email from the government asking me not to disclose.
Oh wow.
Yes, that's how sensitive it was. And I kind of
Yeah.
respect that because of the law and all that
Yeah.
stuff. And
Well, and I think it's not classified, right?
it's
They
not about
just
classified,
maybe
it's
don't
the
want
nature
people
of it.
talking about
Yeah,
it.
it's the nature of it. So, but anyway, the what happened, the and who was involved into this?
Mhm.
None other than Dick Cheney's chief of staff at that time, Scooter Libby.
Mhm.
After investigations and of course taxpayers dollars wasted because those investigations goes in a million,
Yeah.
he was found guilty. That was one who leaked her identity, and up
Yeah.
in jail. He was being pardoned, remember. Yeah, but to make story short, so who was pushing for all this?
Yeah.
It was at that time there were two individuals. One is Wolfowitz,
Yep.
who was Wolfowitz rather, who was the Undersecretary of Defense, and he was the other second person was Richard Pearl,
Mhm.
who was the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy. Those are neocons.
Mhm.
And who the third person was behind the scenes?
Victoria
Nuland.
Nuland.
So, but he wasn't as prominent as those two guys because they
Mhm.
were wired inside the government.
Yeah.
So they pushed the narrative, and we all know what happened after that.
Right. Right.
So that's part of where Victoria Nuland re-emergence or emergence into the political scene as
Yeah.
far as destabilizing other places.
Yeah.
Fast forward to 2014, we all know what happened in
Mhm.
Ukraine. And I disclosed all this in my Russia book. It's because who fomented the tensions and the provided funding. That's
Mhm.
Victoria Nuland through State Department. $5 billion was funded. The reason I'm mentioning all this is to tie it to South Africa.
Yeah.
And here is what we want you guys to get into this. Just because she's going to South Africa, it doesn't mean things are going to happen overnight. Look when that stuff in Ukraine started.
Yeah.
2014.
2014.
When was the military operations of Russia started?
Yeah.
2022.
Right.
Almost
Only
a
a year
decade.
ago. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
almost a decade.
Right.
This is the point of why we decided to talk about this, because
Mhm.
we wanted to be ahead of the curve.
Right.
We wanted to provide you insights into what could be lying ahead moving forward. Because what's lying ahead, as far as Brics, this is with the assumption that India will get its act together.
Sure.
India is another topic that we need
Yeah.
to go into one day, because that's how it starts.
Mhm.
So the logical question you guys need to ask, and you're smart enough to know, what is the objective of her trip to South
Right.
Africa at this time, right before the summit of the BRICS, which is going to be between August 22nd and
Right.
August 24th.
Well, it's interesting because you're talking about time. So first of all, the a couple of things that you mentioned, I think, are really critical to pay attention to. The first one is Ukraine. So I have a video actually. Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson, I don't agree with everything he has to say, but some things he says are pretty spot on. But Tucker Carlson actually did a large piece of his show on Victoria Nuland, and I actually have a very interesting short, a YouTube short from the Carnegie Endowment
Oh,
with Victoria Nuland talking about end goals for Ukraine. So I'll share that in a second.
sure.
But there's a couple things to really be thinking about. And one of the things that you said that is critically important is that these things, they're planned over decades.
That's true.
They're not planned for immediate. And so that's why I think a lot of people, when they argue, the BRICS currency, or there's no way that China's economy, all of that
Yeah.
stuff, right? Yes, it's not happening right now.
No.
But most of us will still be around in a decade, but the world will look very different than it does right now. The world looks very different now than it did a decade ago. So to be paying attention to, this didn't start now, and it probably didn't start in 2014. It probably started before that at some time we didn't know.
Actually, it started all the way back to 2008.
Okay, that's interesting. Tell us more about this.
Oh, that's a lot of stuff sensitive into that aspects of
okay.
it. So,
Well, what is not sensitive that you?
well, it's the idea is that at the beginning of the Obama administration, when he took over,
Yeah,
because who was the vice president at that time?
our current president.
Yeah, and
Joe Biden.
And the dealings of the current vice president's son, or president rather, son, with Burisma in because Vice President Biden at that time pressured Lukashenko at the time of who was elected by the people in Ukraine, pressured him to fire the attorney general in Ukraine. Because why? Because the attorney general in Ukraine was conducting an investigation in return for a $5 million deal.
Wow.
So that's why it runs very deep. Yeah. So, but the whole beginning of all that started at that time, because when they were back in 2008, we start to for us in Washington at that time, thinking in terms of we saw the signs that most Ukrainians wants to move east with Russia, not Europe. We wanted to reverse that trend.
Yeah.
By any means.
Well, we saw the means.
Well, it started.
We're watching it happen right now.
But it started in 2008.
Yeah.
Look how long it took from 2008 to 2014.
Right.
Then from 2014 all the way to now.
Right.
That's why we're saying the pattern. So if just because she's going to Nuland and Victoria Nuland going to South Africa doesn't mean that's no. It's gonna be the question of how South Africa is gonna handle.
That's a great question.
It's because you can't kick her out. One,
right?
It's because first of all, American citizens do not need a visa to go into South Africa. That's one. Second, she's not a persona non grata.
Right. Yeah. There's no reason.
So she's just going because any justification for her will be, oh, I'm just coming to visit the U.S. Embassy.
Right.
There's nothing you can say about that one. So
well, and what it does seem like about her is, there are some people you look at and politically they're not very knowledgeable, or they're politicians, but they don't really know what's going on. I don't believe that personally about her. From what I've read and what I understand about her, she seems to have a pretty solid grasp on things.
Well, she's been around. She's
Yeah.
not somebody who just came from the other side overnight. No, 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 no.
Right.
She's been around in state
Yeah,
departments,
exactly.
and you acquire the knowledge of how countries operates. And
Mhm.
when you practice, when you start practicing,
Yeah.
and you see what works and what doesn't work, because now she saw what works in
Mhm.
Ukraine. Is she about to replicate that in South Africa?
Right.
She saw what worked in Ukraine. We tried it in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
So the patterns.
Right.
So the only thing is, the one to think about it geopolitically is that in the case of South Africa, it's because the timing in geopolitics, timing makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely.
Things don't happen just randomly. There is no
Mhm.
such thing as random in geopolitics. So what am I referring to here? I'm referring to the possibility of how Brics, if it plays its card, if it plays its strategic cards the right way, it
Mhm.
could reshape the trajectory of the global order.
Right.
Yeah, there are those who say,
Absolutely.
"Oh no, Brics can't do that."
Mhm.
Yeah, they can do it now,
Yeah.
but you have to think in terms of the next decade.
Yeah.
And when you have about 40 countries lined up, once of course Brics sort out its issues with India,
Right.
because India now is like the odd
Yeah.
cousin,
Yeah. It
if you
is.
will,
It
odd
is.
member. India will have to make a decision.
Well, and there are talks about replacing India. I mean, there are whispers at this point, but replacing India with Indonesia, for example, because Indonesia does have actually a very large
Yeah,
economy. Um, so my one of the most interesting questions I think here is, why is South Africa actually in BRICS? Because you look at the
yeah,
other BRICS countries,
yeah.
and the BRICS countries are Brazil, China, Russia, India, South Africa,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
What is South Africa actually contributing to the BRICS countries? Because you have China with a very, very large, second largest economy and a large population. You have India with a large population that you're absolutely right, kind of needs to get its
Uh-huh. Act together.
situated, needs to get its
Act
act
together.
together.
We say it the way it is.
Well, I wanted to use a different word, but YouTube, YouTube.
I know what you mean.
Um,
Yeah,
you have Russia, which is very resource rich, and
yeah.
right now it has a lot of oil, has a lot of minerals. And then so you have South Africa. What is the strategic importance of South Africa in particular?
Well, there are two things.
Yes,
Yeah,
let's dive
well,
into that, 'cause I think it's
you
important.
just take DRC, DRC and South Africa, and think about them in terms of natural resources.
Exactly.
Yeah. Then you
Exactly.
take DRC, being the Democratic Republic of Congo.
Mhm,
Then you take also, for example, Niger.
mhm.
Just consider the massive wealth in gold. Then for South Africa in itself, you think about geography. That's why there's
Yeah.
something called political geography. Where South Africa is located, because of access to waters.
Yeah.
Access to waters from which end? Yeah, and
Yeah.
both sides.
Yeah.
You
And
look in the
both sides.
Atlantic and you look in the Indian Ocean.
Yeah.
So this is why you think in terms of why South Africa will play a role. Yes, of course, South Africa can be compared to China's
Of course.
economy. It's common sense. But South Africa is a team player.
Yes.
They are willing
They
to
are.
play with whatever, because if you will move the team, it's like what we do in sport, or even for us
Mhm.
in the military with this, the team. If there is somebody who's hindering the progress of a team, what do?
Yeah. Well, you get rid of them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
replace the guy. That's it, or the
Right.
gal for that
Right.
matter. So, because you could have female also in special ops and all that.
Absolutely.
So the idea of that's one of the key. But for Victoria Nuland's trip at that time, timing matters,
Mhm.
context matters.
Absolutely.
Besides just trying to crash the party, is because any news that's going to come out of BRICS, especially with the announcements of the currency,
Yeah.
her presence there, and even if some events or something happens, will overshadow.
Right.
That's one of the objectives for her.
Completely
Yeah,
overshadow the currency.
yeah. But for her,
Yeah.
and not just her, is the administration, ours.
Right.
The objective is long term, not a short term. It's a long
I
time.
very much agree with that. And I think there's two interesting things.
Yeah.
So the ICC, for example.
Yeah.
So that's where a lot of the drama with Putin going to South Africa for
Africa.
the BRICS summit
That's
has
true.
come from, right?
That's
So
true.
they said, hey, if you go to South Africa,
You'll
gonna
get
arrest
arrested.
you. You'll get arrested. And South Africa at first was basically said, we'll provide security for you.
Yeah.
We don't want that to happen. We'll provide security for you. So South Africa, you're right, really seems to be a team player in
Yeah.
BRICS. Granted, there's a lot in it for them, I think, to be part of BRICS.
For sure.
So I understand why that's happening. And they don't have a better deal, right? The US isn't coming to South Africa and being like, well, why don't you be our partners, right? That's not happening.
Mm.
And so it's very strategic for them. So I'm not saying they're doing it out of the goodness of their heart, right? But that is something that this is my personal take on it, is that was meant to overshadow the currency also. So had Putin actually come to the summit, I think that situation would have overshadowed the BRICS currency.
Yeah.
The second thing that I think is happening that maybe was not predictable
Mhm.
is that people really are talking about the BRICS currency. This isn't something that
In the void.
in the
whatever.
void,
Yeah.
right? And it wasn't
There's a conversation. Yeah.
exactly. There's a
conversation
conversation about
That's
it.
true.
And there's, I think, more of a conversation than people in the United States or the US government had anticipated. I mean, granted, I don't know what they did or didn't anticipate, but there is a large conversation about it, and there should be. And so, you're having a lot of people like us, you're having a
Yeah.
lot of very intelligent people talking about de-dollarization.
Yeah.
Because if you've noticed, a lot of the big things that have happened in terms of this BRICS currency and in terms of de-dollarization in our news cycle have been overshadowed by something else. They've been overshadowed by the submarine, which,
Yeah.
God rest their souls. But, that kind of thing, that's not really global news,
No,
quite frankly.
no,
It is
yeah.
deeply unfortunate, but it is not global news. So you have things like that have come out at very strategic times to overshadow things that are happening in the world. And I think that Victoria Nuland, you're right, is going, and Africa right now is just starting to be talked about as the next China, as the new China, in the sense that they have, number one, a growing youth population. Because
well, for the whole continent,
for the
not
whole
just
continent, right, not South Africa.
For the whole continent.
However, there is also a losing of the west of Africa and a gaining access,
Yeah.
right? So
That's
we
true.
had colonialism in Africa, right?
Yeah.
Now that's not the case anymore. Who does have impact in Africa? Who does own mineral mines? Who does own those resources?
Yeah.
Right now, it's China and Russia a lot.
That is true. Well, this one you have to put it within the context of what's going to be taking place next, I think 2 days, 2-3 days from now. No, actually on Thursday. Check out, guys, this picture. This one here. This here has to do with the upcoming summit between Russia and Africa. This is the second summit in St. Petersburg. The first one took place in 2019 in Sochi.
Yeah.
This one here in St. Petersburg. And it comes at a crucial time. Of course, it's going to be before the BRICS.
Right.
Because most countries, let me move this picture out. Most countries are in Africa are siding with Russia.
Yeah.
That's one. But beside that, Russia is also willing to work with Africa. I'll give you the example of the grain deal that was just
hugely. Yep.
So what the West refrained from disclosing is that we didn't honor our side of the agreement by allowing Russians grain and fertilizer to be also shipped. Why? It's because the deal that was made in July 2022 last year, it was headed by Turkey and the United Nations, and of course Russia and Ukraine. The agreement was, of course, the West, collective West, agreed to it, was that both Ukraine and Russia, Ukraine will ship its own grain, Russia will ship its own grain and fertilizer. All of them, there's no other way for them to get out except through the Black Sea.
Yeah.
Black Sea is under the control of Russia. Russia agreed to create a corridor where that grain will be moved.
Mm-hmm.
And that was working fine from July of last year till recently.
Yep.
We switched sides.
Yep.
We said, oh no, we're only going to allow Ukraine, but not UK, but not Russia.
Yeah.
Well, Russia had to make a decision,
Of
so they
course.
stopped. Why am I bringing this up? Because the Russian president offered the deal to African countries, grain even for free.
Yeah.
For free. That shows you why. I'm sure they're going to address it in the summit that's going to take place on Thursday.
Mhm.
That shows you the relationship between Russia
Right.
and Africa.
And Africa.
And this is something we do not want to see moving forward.
Yeah.
Same way we did for Europe.
Yeah.
When Europe was getting gas from Russia, because
Yeah.
remember, there are two pipelines, right?
Yep.
Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2.
Yeah.
Nord Stream 1 is controlled by Russia. Nord Stream 2 is controlled by Germany.
Yeah.
Okay. We couldn't shut down the first one, but we could influence the second one.
Yeah.
So when Germany starts receiving gas from Russia through a pipeline, first Nord Stream 1, how did the economy of Germany do? Shot up to the top.
Absolutely.
We got concerned about that.
Yep.
So we started to think. As a matter of fact, we have on a record in our library of videos,
Mhm.
there is a video there. And I remember I mentioned, I did a video with Ross, I remember way back,
Mhm.
that when the US threatened to sanction Germany, and we said, what the heck?
Right.
Sanctioning an ally.
An ally.
We threatened them because we were concerned that Germany was getting closer to Russia and economically moving up.
Yeah.
So fast forward to what just took place with Nord Stream 2. Here is a shocker for you.
Mhm.
Most people do not know that when the planning was in motion regarding the blow up of the Nord Stream 2, the White House was presented with two options.
Mhm.
And the two options were, do you want the act to be reversible or irreversible?
Reversible.
You know what it means?
Yeah.
Which means is if we conduct an op,
Mhm.
if you want it reversible, that means we're going to just create short-term damage and it can be reversed and things will go
Right.
normal. If you want us to conduct an op where the damage will be irreversible, we can do that.
Yeah.
And guess what was the decision on?
Irreversible.
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 Because we never, ever wanted Germany to get closer
Yeah.
to Russia. And when you think about Germany's economy, you think about Europe.
Oh, absolutely.
That's what's
Absolutely.
at the heart of it. So this
Yeah.
is why I said at the beginning of the show, guys, the parallels.
Right.
That's what I'm referring to here.
Right.
So for Victoria Nuland to be in South Africa, it's because you're seeing the parallels.
Well, and where is this conference, right? It's in St. Petersburg.
That's correct.
And so basically at the same time that more or less, right? Because I think we don't know exactly when she's going, but more or less, look at that timing. Look at the timing of Victoria Nuland going to South Africa.
Yeah.
At the same time that this summit is being held in
Yeah.
Africa, more or less.
But it was a reason why the date is not disclosed,
Right.
to leave everybody
Wondering,
guessing.
yeah.
Yes, yeah, that's the whole. But the objective of it is also to reduce the impact of that strength of that cooperation.
Right.
Brics can play a major role in
Right.
influencing the global trajectory, especially with what's going on with us
Mhm.
regarding our ill-conceived foreign policy. We don't
Right.
have foreign policy, like I always say.
Right.
But for this, to me, as an analyst, I am seeing the signs of another path,
Mhm.
almost similar to Ukraine. It's not going to be reflected in the same setting
Right.
because South Africa is not Ukraine,
Right.
you know. And don't get me wrong, South Africa has its own corruption issues and host.
hugely.
Yeah, don't get me wrong.
yeah,
And I
yeah.
don't speak softly on countries like
Right,
that. I
right.
don't care who they are.
Right.
You know, they need to act there or get their act together regarding the corruption. As a matter of fact, corruption is one of the things hindering not just South Africa,
Right.
but the
all
whole
of
continent.
Africa. Yeah.
For the wealth they have. You know how much wealth they have?
Right.
Manpower,
Right.
natural resources, geography.
Right.
Can you imagine if they get their act together and work together.
Yeah.
And this is why you're seeing now the emergence of some African leaders who are pushing hard against the West.
Mhm.
That's why they end up kicking France out of Mali.
Yeah.
That was for a reason.
Well, and kicking France out of Mali, for example, is probably very good for that area, right? It's probably actually a very good thing.
Yeah.
And it's interesting watching the political changes happen in
Mhm.
Africa as we are seeing Chinese investment, as we are seeing Russian influence and investment. So I think it's actually become very, very clear that there really is a shift of power that's happening in Africa. And it isn't Africa for the sake of Africa.
Yeah.
It's other countries, specifically Russia and China,
Yeah.
going into Africa to exert that influence. And like I said, Africa is one of the only places in the world, the entire continent. So it's specific places in Africa, but it's one of the only places in the world where we are actually seeing an increase in population instead of the massive decrease that we're having even in China, in the United States, all over Europe. We have a massive decrease in population. People don't want to have kids.
That's true.
And it's interesting to think, actually, why do people not want to have kids? And, I think there's a lot of reasons for that. But one of the biggest ones is the massive instability, massive instability in the West. Right now, if you go to any Western country, we have this constant war. We have this narrative. We have, climate change. We have all of this stuff going on. It's a challenging time, and it's very expensive to have kids.
That's true.
Very, very expensive.
I want to touch on one point you mentioned about exerting influence.
Yeah.
I know what you meant by that.
Mhm.
Just for our viewers, so they won't misinterpret that.
Yes,
I wanted
people
to.
are good at misinterpreting. I've noticed.
That's
in the
why
comments.
I wanted to clarify this one.
Thank you.
So, because usually in foreign affairs, anytime you mention the word exert, it always take that negative connotations.
Sure.
That's not in this context, because I knew what you meant.
Yeah.
And for right reason. It's because this exertion of influence, it will be on a mutual basis.
Sure.
Which means both are benefiting.
Yeah.
Where the bad part about exerting influence takes that negative,
Right.
when one party is exerting influence, like what we have with Europe, like what we have with Japan, Philippines, and now Australia. I don't know if you heard what happened in Australia 2 days ago.
What happened?
We had our Navy personnel marching on the street for a parade of sorts.
Oh.
Is bad. Is bad optics of it.
That's very bad.
Yeah, this is why New Zealand is taking the opposite direction.
Yeah.
New Zealand now is being labeled as the bad, not the odd. Why? Because they saw what took place in Australia.
Yeah.
They said, no. We're going to maintain our relationship with China.
Yeah.
We're going to maintain our trade and so forth.
Well, so here's the thing about that, because I absolutely agree with you. I do not see the same thing happening with China and Russia exerting influence in the same ways that Europe did, for example, because colonialization was terrible.
Oh yeah.
Like that is a horrible mark that the European countries more or less left on a lot of parts of the world. Even for the United States, I remember when I was a kid growing up, Columbus discovered America.
What?
That's insanity to think about. To think about children being taught that Columbus discovered a continent that had a lot of people on it already, and that already had civilizations, and that other people had already found, seems kind of crazy, right?
Yeah.
And then, everything that happened, he was touted as a hero. We still have Columbus Day, right? We have, but that's the narrative, right? The narrative is, we went and did this great thing, when I think the reality now is people realize that didn't happen. So colonialization of many parts of the world was actually horrible and horrifying. What I'm saying is I am seeing it happen differently. I am seeing it happen in the boosting of local economies, in the buying up of mines and resources. However, I do want to make this point, because I've said this before, but I think it's, to me, it's one of those gnawing things in my mind. When you own everything,
Okay.
right? So let's say China and Russia own massive amounts of natural resources all over. Yes, they are absolutely building up those communities, and
Hmm.
those communities needed to be built up. So I respect that very much. However, when you own things, you have a level of influence that
That is
other
true.
people don't.
That is true.
And when you look at China, for example, and China has a lot of its own problems. If you
Yeah.
guys are interested, I would really like to do a deep dive into some of the economic problems that China is facing,
Hmm.
because although they are a huge economy, they are facing some very massive problems in their own right.
Yeah.
One of them being population. The aging population and the youth unemployment are huge problems for China. But there is an influence that comes with money. There is an influence that comes with owning natural resources.
Uh-huh.
And I don't want to put that aside. I don't want to say it doesn't matter, because it does matter. So I want to be clear about that. I do see them building up those communities. However, there is an influence that comes with owning things and money.
Yeah, but at the same time, there is the arrangements from the beginning, so those countries can say no if they don't want to. I mean, as I
Absolutely.
said, I
Absolutely.
mean, no country is going to get involved in infrastructures for free. There is no such thing,
And they
and
shouldn't. They
yeah,
shouldn't.
I think for us the big concern is that that's going to tip the balance of power. This
Yeah,
is where the key issue is.
exactly.
That's what's at the heart of it. It's
And that's why
because
Victoria Nuland is going.
yeah, and this is why we are not willing to accept the reality that the world has moved from a unipolar or
Right.
shifted and not moved. I'll use the term the right way. It shifted from a unipolar to a multipolar.
Right.
We are not willing to accept that. It's no longer than, it's no different. I'm sorry, not longer. No different than what happened in Washington after the end of the Cold War.
Yeah.
And still, the mindset thinking that we won the Cold War. We never did.
Right.
Those who were claiming this either had no understanding of Russian history
Mhm.
or were oblivious to living in their parallel world
Right.
that no. There was never an end to the Cold War.
Right.
It's in a different setting for that. So with what's going on in Africa, especially with the presence of Russia and China,
Mhm.
this specifically aimed at the shifting of the balance of power,
Absolutely.
because even though we never had a policy towards Africa, we always left that to our
European
European
counterparts.
counterparts.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I wasn't going to use the term
Got it.
counterpart.
Are European allies?
I wouldn't even was going
Yeah.
to use the word ally. I was going to use the term servants.
Ah, well,
So
that
yeah,
might be more
well,
accurate,
it's
quite
the
frankly.
truth.
Yeah.
It's the truth.
Sure.
You think European can do anything without the approval of the US?
No.
You
Not
you
not
look
at
at
this point.
look
Not at
at
this
the
point.
UK. Look at this is why UK had a hard time,
Mhm.
and I intend to address this in the course.
Yeah.
Had a hard time at the beginning accepting how colonial entity will become better than us.
Yeah.
Britain never was happy about when we got the independence
Of
and we
course.
overtook Britain.
Right.
So that's why now it becomes clear they can do
Mhm.
nothing without the approval of the US.
Yeah.
It's no different than France, Germany, Netherlands. Netherlands is bad at that, which, by the way, you
Mhm.
don't hear much about, but it's in same fold.
Yeah.
But if you look at the history of Africa, who was there, you look at the main players. If we are to go way back, Portugal,
Yep.
you look at France, Germany, Belgium, and Dutch.
Yeah.
Those were the main. Africa, I'm sorry, Russia and China in modern day, in contemporary time,
Mhm.
came to represent the shift of that balance.
Absolutely.
That's why France didn't like when he was
Absolutely.
kicked out of France.
Yeah.
But also because the massive resource, like I said last time,
Mhm.
how come all of a sudden France announcing that it has massive amount of gold?
Right.
Where that gold came from? France doesn't have gold.
Right. Right.
Where did it come from? So
Well, it came from Africa.
Niger.
Yeah.
So and this is where at the heart of really what Victoria Nuland is going to
Mhm.
Africa for
Yeah.
long term.
Yeah. And I agree with you. I think it is really the power play by the United States to really try and get some influence really back, some ownership back of
Yeah.
Africa.
Yeah. Well, I do have a big concern within BRICS, and that concern
Mhm.
has to do with India. And
Yeah,
I don't
yeah,
shy away
no,
from
I
saying.
agree.
I know I noticed some comments from some. I'm
Mhm.
like, I don't like India. It's a weak argument. You
Right.
guys, please, whoever put that stuff, stop talking
Yeah.
nonsense. It is nonsense. Just take a step back and really think about it. All of a sudden, you got an India, one in BRICS that is already claiming, oh, we are not going to support the currency. Well, that's fine.
Right.
You don't want to support the currency. It's because they want their rupees. And we will talk about that when we talk
Yes.
about
Yeah.
the I don't want to get ahead of myself
Yeah.
if we're going to do the second topic
Yeah.
about the
But you're absolutely
BRICS
right.
currency.
They do want to prop up their rupees, which I understand. Okay, like I understand that phenomena of wanting to prop up your own
Well,
currency,
wanting
right?
versus the reality are two different
Right.
things.
Right. They just don't. And I actually really love India. I loved being in India.
Yeah.
I
It's
Indian
nice
people,
place. It's old
absolutely.
civilization.
Oh my gosh.
Nobody can decline sort of dismiss that.
Ancient Indian culture
Yeah, you can.
is priceless.
He offered a lot to humanity.
Yeah.
It's the problem now is where it's headed
Right.
with this ill-conceived policies. Those are wrong policies that Modi, Prime Minister Modi, is embarking on.
Yeah.
Those policies are not and will not be serving Indian people.
Right.
It will be serving the upper class.
Right.
I mean, I look at just what happened with the what's that company, Foxconn.
Mm-hmm.
They
Oh,
left.
yeah.
You look at the company from China that offered $1 billion manufacture for the EV batteries. You know, China turned it down, playing the same or claiming the same playbook.
Yeah.
Oh, security concerns.
Yeah.
Do they realize the opportunities that's going to provide?
Mm-hmm.
You know, come on.
Well, I mean, even last time I was in India, the joke was there's corruption, right? Like I mean, they told me that.
Yeah.
This wasn't something that I got out of nowhere. They were the ones joking about corruption in India, and that was, in their opinion, the biggest hindrance to India really becoming a global power. Is that there was just too much corruption.
Yeah.
There were too many people who were looking out for their own best interest and not for the best interest of the country as a whole. And I personally hope that changes. I hope that changes.
I don't see that. I don't see that. If Modi's still in power, I don't see that. The reason I'm saying this, I am going back to the time when Gandhi was the PM. I'm going back to the time when Atal Vajpayee was the PM. I'm going back to the time when Manmohan Singh was India wasn't dealing with this issue.
Yeah.
India was moving forward.
Yeah.
India has certain things working for it.
Yeah.
Two things. You got the manpower.
Population,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And they got the brain power.
Yeah. Very, very
But
smart.
they're not utilizing this the right way.
Right.
How can you expect a country to play a global role when your infrastructure is not where it needs to be?
Right.
This is not about putting India down, like some
of
have
course
argued.
not.
It's
Yeah,
nonsense. It's about presenting the facts as they are.
Yeah.
How can you expect to play a role on a global stage when your poverty level still way up?
Absolutely.
You have to fix these domestic issues. Then you can consider. So the way I see the problem in BRICS, with India still being there, is now the BRICS will be hindered at every turn because India will be playing those policies of, oh no, we don't disagree with this because it doesn't benefit or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, I got a word for India. If you don't like it, just pack your bags and get out.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
Well, and that might very well happen.
They did that.
They did. Very well happen.
India did this with the RCEP, with the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership.
Yeah.
Just for the record, RCEP did not kick India. It was India's choice to leave because it had to realize, hey, those policies are not in my interest.
Yeah.
So India will do itself a favor by doing both, leaving the BRICS and leaving the SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization.
Yeah.
So otherwise, the progress of those organizations is not going to move forward.
Yeah.
Because here is to tie it to what we're talking about. The fear in the West is that if BRICS keeps moving forward with the potential list of countries, Mark my word on this. It will
Mhm.
overtake the EU's economy in no
Absolutely.
time. You already have about 41% of a consumer
Mhm.
global market isn't just within BRICS
Right.
countries.
Is
And
and
India plays a role into that.
right.
But they're going to have to sort of get on with the program or get out.
Mhm.
Simple as that.
Well, and I absolutely agree with that, and that's maybe a great segue into our second
Yeah,
topic.
let's do that.
And that is, what exactly is happening with the BRICS currency? Number one, what is it, and how is it going to be tied to gold? And what really is going on here? Um, because we don't have a lot of information, but what we do have is a lot of hype.
Do you
Right
want,
now, we got a lot of
yeah.
hype going.
Do you want a short answer?
Yes, let's
You,
dive
you want
into it.
short answer?
Sure.
Nobody knows.
Right. Nobody knows. However, there are some
That's
people
true.
that are putting forth some actually very interesting ideas in terms of what actually might be happening. So I have a lot of respect for
Okay.
Jim Rickards, and I want to bring up a little bit of what he said. Go ahead.
I want to say thank you
Oh,
to
yeah.
yes,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah,
yes,
of
yes,
course.
yes. I want to say we want to say thank to Chow Young. Thank you very much for your super sticker. Greatly appreciate it. Sorry to interrupt
No,
you,
no,
Elizabeth.
of course, of course. Yes, thank you guys for your support.
We appreciate it,
very much
yes.
appreciate it. We are a small team, and we really appreciate all of you guys so much.
Well, especially if we're planning on trip to China.
Yeah,
The cost involved with that.
absolutely. So this is from Jim Rickards, and one of the most interesting thing that he brought up is the fact that supply chain, because right now actually, since the pandemic, we've had pretty serious supply chain issues. So messing up the supply chain and inflation. So like the grain deal, for example, the grain deal messes up the supply chain straight up. Messes up the supply chain. And so there are several losers, one of them being the people who are in fact supposed to get that grain.
Yeah.
But part of what's happened here between these sanctions is the supply chain's actually been messed up, right?
Yeah.
So the US weaponizes sanctions. And you say this all the time, and I really agree with this, that the US actually pushed it too far this time. That the US push with the U.S. proxy war. I mean, I guess that's not a hidden thing anymore.
Oh, no.
It was for a long time. The U.S. was like, no. Inflation's transitory, right?
Yeah.
It's that kind of thing. But the U.S. proxy war and the sanctions that have been put on Russia are the straw that broke the camel's back.
That's true.
It made not only Russia, but other countries really have to figure out a way around the United States punishment of countries that they don't like for doing whatever it is. Because you're right. You were talking about the US trying to sanction Germany.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
We threatened them.
We threatened them recently. This is fairly, I mean, it's not recent, but it's fairly
about
recent.
2 years ago.
Yeah.
2.5 years ago.
So using monetary policy to punish countries for not doing the thing that you want is very bad policy.
Yeah.
And we're seeing that. I really believe that a lot of what's happening with the BRICS currency is actually a result of that. Is actually a result of sanctions that have been used too much. Right? If you're going to use something like sanctions, use them very strategically. Don't use them on everyone for every reason.
And that's what we did. Yeah.
And that is the problem. That is what happened. So I want to bring up what Rickards actually says about the BRICS currency.
Before you do that, just to let our viewers know who Jim Rickards is. He used to be a CIA advisor. He used to be the Pentagon advisor. And also he did some advising for State Department. So he's a lawyer by trade, somebody who knows what he's talking about. And he's very aware of the, what's the central bank.
Yes.
Financial
Hugely,
policies. He's very, very well. So it's somebody, he knows what he's talking about. If you saying the term analyst, he is at the top.
He really is. He really is.
But he is the one who used to advise CIA and the Pentagon, which I was aware of. So
and he's been accurate a lot. So
yeah, his
assessment
is very, very.
So a lot of respect. For
Indeed,
Rickards.
indeed. Yeah, as a matter of fact, I'm thinking of having him here one day.
I would love
Do you want me to
that.
reach out to him?
Please.
Okay.
And guys,
You
if
guys
you
want
want
to
to,
have Jimmy
yeah.
Records here?
And if you guys wanna send some pokes his way and be like,
Yeah,
hey,
yeah.
geopolitics and conflict show, you should be on it.
Yeah.
Very respected man,
Yeah.
and an understanding of monetary policy that I think is unparalleled.
Well, I'm gonna reach out to him. So because we happen to know some names.
I'd be very excited.
So,
Honestly, I'd be very excited.
yeah, we'll do that.
So he said a couple of things that are very interesting. And the first is he did talk about the grain deal. So we did a show on the grain deal,
Mhm.
and some people may not really understand why that's important. But ultimately, we're looking at food stability, and food stability or food instability is one of the things that will cause internal conflicts in countries. It'll bring down countries. I mean, it's very, very important.
It's known in international relations under the term
Yes.
food security.
Foods,
Just FYI for
absolutely.
you guys to know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we think of food as in many countries, especially here in the United States, we think of it as a given.
Oh yeah.
Because we
Yeah.
have such a
It's
so
because
detached.
we've never been hungry.
Right.
That's what it is.
Right.
I mean, starve people for one day and see how they're gonna start to appreciate. That's why I don't. It gets under my skin when I see people throwing food in a garbage.
Yeah.
They have no idea that there is someone elsewhere in the world that didn't eat for the last 24 hours.
Right.
So, because
Right.
we
Oh,
never
yeah.
experienced that. Sorry
Well,
to interrupt.
No, absolutely.
I get so hyped out on this
Absolutely.
because it bothers me.
It should
Yeah,
bother you.
Because most of us
Bothers
here
me
in the
too.
US have no idea.
Yeah.
They thinking that food it's given.
Yeah.
It is not.
It's not. Well, I mean, and this is a personal story, but I can tell you guys, I've been so broke, and especially around college when I was young, I have definitely been broke enough to know what that feels like. So very personal, but very true. When I
Yeah.
was younger, that is something that I experienced. But one of the things, but we take you're absolutely right. In the United States, especially, we take that for granted. Whereas a lot of other countries, food instability has been very, very real. Now, I think we are actually seeing that here in the United States
Yeah.
more than we ever have, with a vast rise in poverty here. And even this actually really bothers me is, when governments, for example, want to say, oh, we've lowered poverty, one of the tricks that they use is that they redefine what poverty is. Or they redefine what middle class is. But then you go and look at the actual number that's the definition for middle class, and you say there's no way a family could survive on that. It's just not possible.
That's true.
I
want to say thank quickly here to Tom 10. Thank you so much for your super sticker.
Yes, thank
Truly
you.
appreciate it. Thank you very much.
So anyway, if you guys hear numbers like that, like, oh, I've raised the economy, oh, I've raised, go look at those numbers and see what the truth of that is. That's something that bothers me a lot, because that's just straight lying and manipulation.
You're
Okay.
right.
So back to Jim Rickards though, and back to this Brics currency. So I want to highlight this because we talked about the grain deal, and I think a lot of people wondered why that was important.
Yeah.
So this is what Rickards says. He says, Putin has been very patient about this. He had a deal. Ukraine was not living up to their end of the deal. Putin says, we are the ones getting attacked, so screw the deal. What's that going to do to the price of grain? It's going to send grain prices up.
It already went up.
It's already up 10% in a matter of days.
That's true. I just saw it this morning. I saw it this morning.
Huge.
It went up already.
10% for some people, 10% might be nothing, but 10% is substantial. Yeah. And Putin knew what he was doing.
Yeah. But that's why he said to Africans, he'll be willing to give them grain for free.
Yeah.
Because that means what? That means Russia produces enough if they're willing to give it for free.
Absolutely.
But also for Putin is a strategic calculation, building long-term relations.
Yeah.
Well, that's the.
I absolutely agree. So I wanted to talk about that. The next thing that I want to bring up that he says is, what is the gold Brics? So we call it gold-backed currency. But what does that actually mean? Does that mean that for one, he calls it brick, right? But for one Brics currency, can you go trade it in for one ounce of gold? What can you actually do? What does gold-backed actually mean, or mineral backed. So at the very
Mhm.
beginning, there was talk about it being land backed, mineral backed, natural resource backed, gold backed. What does that actually mean?
Yeah.
Right? So can you go trade in one currency for
Another.
X amount of land? Can you go trade in one currency for nickel, copper, silver? What can you actually trade this in for? So I wanted to bring up what he says, because what he says is actually way smarter than trading X for Y. So
Mm.
when we have a traditional gold backed currency, we have you can take your paper note. This is what the US dollar used to be, right?
Yeah.
You could take your paper note, you could go to the bank, you
bank.
could get your ounce of gold. And that was your paper note gold transition, right?
Yeah.
So this is what he says. I think it may be, okay, let's see. He says a lot of stuff. So, okay, let's say a brick, he calls it a brick, is worth 1 ounce of gold. Today, that's $1,970 per ounce, except the brick is not anchored to the dollar, it's anchored to gold, which stands in the middle of this equation. So the dollar price of gold is going to be up and down all the time, which means the dollar brick exchange rate is going to be up and down all the time. They don't have to defend the brick. They have gold, but they don't have to back it up with gold. They actually don't need any gold. So this is interesting. If you have made your currency anchored to gold, do you want the price to go up or down? You want the price of gold to go up, because that means the brick is worth more dollars and the dollar is crashing.
Shame.
It's a way to destroy the dollar. That's what I
really
really
interesting.
want to point
Yeah.
out. So Rickard says it is a way to destroy the dollar. You don't need dollars and you don't need gold.
Yeah.
You need to be smart enough to anchor your currency to gold.
Gold.
And when the dollar inflation starts to go up, which
Yeah.
what do we got, right? Your currency is going to be worth more because of how you pegged it, not to dollars, but how you pegged it to
the
gold.
Well, just to support this, last night, I usually do two things every day, believe it or not. I'll share some of my
Oh yeah, please.
my private,
What are those two things?
my private life. That's I always take a look at the computer for the latest info before I go to bed, because that will be the cycle.
Yeah, it is.
Then
It's
I'll
a
check
cycle.
that in for the first thing in the morning at 0700 hours. And I turn the computer on before I go work out, whatever. So, and the one thing that was yesterday was that dollar and oil going down while gold is going up.
Yeah.
I was driving here I was driving to the studio. I saw the gas and compared it yesterday.
Oh yeah.
I saw it at $3.45 a gallon. Yesterday it was at $3.19, I believe, something like that. So, right, just to tie it back to what you said. So gold is already going up.
Yeah.
And that was the conversation why we had the CEO of Noble Gold.
Yes.
That was, which, by the way, guys, you will see the video for.
We'll release
we
it.
invited the CEO of Noble Gold company.
Yeah.
Interesting insights to hear directly from him and why.
Yeah.
And what you just said confirm exactly what Colin Plum is the name of the CEO said. But Jim Record was right, because now the gold is going up. And this is exactly what's at the heart of what this new currency is going to be about.
Yeah.
And this is where the fear of the United States and why Victoria Nuland
absolutely
is heading out to South Africa. There are a lot of concerns in Washington.
Yeah.
Even though we heard that IMF said, oh, they're going to allow now Argentina to trade with the yuan, the Chinese.
Yeah.
There's another thing before I forget. Another reason why the oil prices and gold and the dollar went down, because also the fear.
Right.
The fear of, by the end of this month, which only 4 days from now or 5, a decision about interest rate is going to go up.
Oh my, I know.
So it's all,
oh my God.
This is where the fear is.
And I actually want to bring up, because, people think the interest rate only affects the US.
It
absolutely does not. No. Because there are other countries whose currencies are tied to the dollar.
And this is why they are thinking about time to move out of the dollar.
Right.
My big fear, you know what my big fear? Not about the balance of power, global balance. My big fear is that Americans have no idea what's going to hit them in the head.
Yeah.
When they're going to start to realize going to the grocery store and whatever money they have won't be, it just won't cut it.
Yeah.
That's where my fear
Well,
is.
and it
They don't
already
understand.
kind of is.
It
I
is
mean,
already.
honestly, it's
Already.
very
Yeah.
stressful.
So that is one of the things. So if BRICS, and this is what again I go end up going back to that role of India into all
Mhm.
this, because it will hinder that progress of the BRICS. Because
Yeah.
the way I see it is, don't get me wrong, guys, it pains me to say this because my country is going to be going down. It's our country. But at the same time, I am seeing a different outcome. If that currency or BRICS comes up, now
Yeah.
you have a counterbalance to the US dollar.
Yeah.
You will have some sort of an alternative,
Yeah.
because we abused the dollar. Let's just say it
Yeah.
straightforward. So could this be a wake-up call for
Yeah.
Washington? Maybe, maybe not.
Yeah, I think you're right. Maybe,
So
maybe not. I think, but we're seeing a lot of very interesting things happen here, right? We're seeing central bank digital currency, that entire conversation. There's been some pieces of that launched. So some of the interesting conversations around that is the central bank digital currency, more or less, being used to regain the dollar power or regain the hegemonic power
power of the dollar.
of the currency,
currency
whatever the
together.
currency
Yeah.
is, right? And so I'm interested to see where that is, because the central banks know that this is coming. They're not blind to it. And I think they're not so foolish that they're just gonna, just let it happen. I think that they know.
Yeah.
And so as we're looking, but a central bank digital currency, I think is very bad for everyone. I don't think that's a good idea. And so it's interesting to see over the next few years what arises to
Yeah.
get that power back. Because I absolutely do not see the US, the Federal Reserve, the politicians, the government, this is just saying, oh, it's okay. You guys can have,
Yeah.
this piece of the economy, of the global economy. No, I don't see that, right?
No.
I don't see that happening. So what strategies are they putting in place
Yeah.
to change that?
Well, look at, for example, decision by the Russian president today, as a matter of fact,
Yeah.
to sign the Russia's digital ruble law and launch
That's
the
interesting.
electronic platform for that.
Yeah.
That's a hint right there.
Mhm.
And despite what you hear about, well, the sanctions are hindering the Russian economy, it's a lie.
Yeah.
It is a lie. So basically, where it's going to be, if I am again to look at history after World War II, when the decision was made among the Allied powers to carve out Europe at the time, and we all know what happened. This is exactly what's taking place now,
Yeah.
especially with Ukraine, because we are pushing other Eastern European countries to the slaughterhouse, like
Yeah.
Poland.
Yeah.
I just read yesterday the decision by the defense ministry in Poland, sending troops to the border with Belarus. Poland, it's not the Polish people, but rather the government.
Yeah.
They just have no clue what are they getting into.
Well, I love Poland. I love Poland.
Yeah,
Poland,
wonderful.
you need to stay safe,
Yeah,
guys.
yeah. It's mind-boggling.
Yeah.
So in the case of the currency here, so you're starting to see, when you see signs, I'll be watching to see if China's going to embark on similar tactics as far as digital. But I don't.
Yeah.
Again, I'm just as of now.
Yeah.
I don't see that moving forward, because they are realizing with their currency, the yuan or RMB, there's more acceptance of it.
Yeah.
So why will they?
Well, and so that's also the question about a BRICS currency, right? So if everyone is using their own independent currencies and they're all trying to bolster their own currencies globally, right? So not just their own currencies amongst each other, but globally, right? So
that was the whole idea of the
Right.
BRICS currency. This is why India does not. I'm sure they understand. You know why India is objecting to all this? It's because they said they don't want the yuan to be well their economy, China's economy in comparison to India's economy. So, but that does not mean India cannot trade in its rupees.
Right.
But it will be on a bilateral level, not on a global.
Right.
The BRICS is trying to get in on the global, to give another alternative. And this is where it's like mind-boggling.
Right.
Why India doesn't get it? let alone India will benefit from.
Right.
India's rupees. Who's gonna buy rupees?
No,
I mean,
well,
just
yeah, that's
yeah,
that's the
it's the
problem,
truth
right?
and reality. So what I found very interesting is that the Russian president made that decision about
Right.
the digital ruble. That's also sent the signal right there. Okay, you're looking at BRICS currency, but you're looking at a digital ruble.
Right.
But
I'm
this leads
very
me.
interested in
Well,
this.
as an
Yeah.
analyst, I have to think outside the box.
Yeah.
What am I thinking about? Energy.
Right. And I don't know. This is interesting. I'm interested to watch it play out. But what do you mean by energy? Tell me a little bit more about what you're thinking.
Well, that's lead us to the third topic.
Yes.
Because we're talking about the geopolitics of energy.
It's
It
mostly
has-
what geopolitics
It's all about
is
because energy. Yeah. So what am I referring to here? I am referring to the thinking of how it was prior to the Russian military operations in Ukraine,
Yeah.
and how the flow of energy, especially for Europe,
Yeah.
Europe used to get unlimited access of energy.
Yeah.
Germany now is finding the hard way. I've even got a word that there is a possibility now in Hungary,
Mm-hmm.
Budapest, that they might even get out of the EU altogether.
That's interesting.
It's because Hungary gets a lot of energy from
Yeah.
from Russia
Yeah.
at a discounted price. So the whole idea of this geopolitics of energy is the idea of how now country is going to have to think in terms of
Right.
with the changes in the global order. And I did find one sort of, when you think about in terms of the changes, we all hear about the global climate change and
Yeah.
clean energy and
Well, and now countries are starting. So there's two things about that. First of all, natural gas being classified as a green energy is very odd to me because it used to not be a green energy.
yeah.
So I guess that only, that seems very odd to
Yeah.
me that all of a sudden we would reclassify the stuff that's useful for us
Yeah.
into the green category. And the second is a lot of countries are now starting to abandon that. And I think that that's very interesting. So we're watching people abandon that. Okay, but that's an aside.
You're right. Yeah, it's the idea of how you're going to be thinking about the distribution of geopolitical power when it comes down to energy.
Absolutely.
What am I talking about here in all this in a simple language? And to tie it to, for example, the BRICS currency.
Yeah.
And because where's the main energy coming from? So you get key countries around the world.
Absolutely.
We do have energy here in the US, believe it or not.
Yeah.
But as a matter of fact, we produce a lot.
Yes.
Except that we are not using it.
Yeah.
By design.
By design. It's one of the things that Biden, when he first came in office, he shut down the Keystone pipeline.
Yeah.
And then under the guise of it being green, which really bothers me because it's not like we started consuming less oil. We just bought it from someone else.
Yeah. What tells you right there the role of the lobbyists into all this?
That's not green.
So, no, it's not. It's a lie, basically. That's what anything coming out of the administration is like, or the globalists, or all of them. I mean, I've seen the images of what's his name, Evo Bill, coming out of the plane. You look at what's his name, the actor Leo DiCaprio. Flying in a helicopter to go for dinner and talking about green. It's hypocrisy at the highest order. We're not going to worry about this one here. For now, we're focusing on this, the distribution of this geopolitical power. What am I referring to here? I'm referring to the idea of how, if you are to think about the expansion of BRICS, adding countries, because you're already hearing people saying, why don't you exchange India for Iran?
Yeah.
What does Iran's going to bring to the table?
India for we got a couple of countries here that they're looking.
What does, for example, bring in Indonesia into the area? What does, for example, bring in Saudi Arabia to BRICS?
Not an I, but
but it's
I'll
still.
take it.
What do they have in common? Energy
Oil,
production.
yeah.
Algeria, oil producing. So what I'm talking about, this geopolitical distribution here, or the distribution of geopolitical power when it comes down to energy. You think about it in terms of the new currency and tie it to Russia's decision to move with the digital, but at the same time with the BRICS currency. So then what do you have inside BRICS? You get a large market of India.
Oh,
of
yeah.
and China.
China.
This is with the assumption that India stays in.
Right.
But if it's not,
Well, one of the things that India did
Yeah.
is when the US was like sanctions on Russian oil, they said nope.
yeah, they did.
So I think that's actually a really big thing that you're exactly speaking to, is that India was like, guys, we're not gonna do that.
Then how about the currency? How come they all of a sudden they are saying no to the Brics currency when they could benefit
Right?
from it?
No, I think that's a very interesting.
I found it very.
India's playing both sides.
I find it very odd that those decisions were made right after Modi's trip to Washington.
Wow.
Well, we gotta say it,
right?
Yeah, we gotta. That's what I always say. So the idea of, you think about it in terms of the BRICS currency moving forward into that direction, Russia will be able to coordinate with, let's say, Africa.
Yeah.
What does Africa have?
Resources.
What does it?
Mineral
Africa?
resources, and a lot of them.
And oil.
And oil.
You look at Angola. You look at Equatorial Guinea. Those are oil producers. You look at Libya. You look at Algeria. You look at Sudan.
Yeah.
Those are major oil producers.
Yeah.
So, and this is where I see this the geopolitics of oil is gonna now diver. This is all without even talking about the Arctic, which I argued in my book.
Yes.
So I argued about this one back then, of the idea of how access to $35 trillion. I think there is a quote that I sent you here.
Oh, yes.
Somewhere. It's because
all right, let me find it. You keep going.
So it was the idea of the access to this untapped natural resources. Okay. And even to me back then became evident, accessing to this massive energy, it's going to change the dynamics, not only for Russia, because China is also involved in financial projects in the Arctic.
Absolutely.
And this is what I'm talking about, that the geopolitics of oil is going to change the trajectory. And what makes it even worse for the US is that most of those transactions will be conducted in other currency than the dollar.
Well, and okay, so first of all, I have this quote. So let me actually read this quote. So guys, David has a book. I don't know if you have seen it or not. Or we don't talk about, I think, a lot of our coolest accomplishments, but this is one of them.
Yes.
And so this is a quote from David's book, The Dynamic of Russia's Geopolitics, Remaking the Global Order. Russia has long sought economic and military dominance in its northern shores, a region that holds as much as $35 trillion worth of untapped oil and natural gas. Even China, a nation with no territorial claim to the Arctic, has begun funding Arctic development projects. It underscores the region's growing global importance and influence. And with climatic change impacting the area and the world over, we should expect fierce competition in the near future. So I want to say something about that, because it's something I've long thought about as a potential tie, because it's interesting to see the patterns emerge over time. So speaking directly to this, David, I have often wondered if that is actually one of China's strategic interests with being allied so heavily with Russia, is actually the Arctic. Because right now there is a really big fight for Greenland. We've sort of touched on this a little bit, right? But that's, basically you're looking at polar ice caps melting, and so all of a sudden you have new trade routes, which is what you're speaking to.
Yes.
And the people who really owned those trade routes, they have an economic leg up that the others don't. So let's say Russia, China are the countries that get real dominance over those trade routes. That leaves the US in the cold. Let's say the US gets dominance over those trade routes. That leaves Russia, China out in the cold.
Yeah.
And so this is a very big, so yes, it's oil, but it's also trade routes.
I detailed that in the book. If you guys want to read the book, you'll get the answer.
I'm going to show it again because I think it's very
detailed answer there that I provided. But the short answer is yes, China got involved into that because of energy. And the reason being has to do with the pipeline.
Yeah.
There's a pipeline that's going to deliver gas to China. China's consumption. I did a private presentation for some high-ranking military individuals and all that. One of them was a 1-star NATO general attended.
Wow.
Yeah, I didn't even know it myself till I finished the presentation, and he came over and asked me a question, and I saw the rank, and I heard the accent.
Yeah.
It was a British.
Yeah.
And I said, "What a British general doing here?"
Yeah.
Oh, he said, "I just came to listen." Ah,
Well, there's a reason.
I was like, "Oh, okay." And it was about the Arctic.
Right.
Literally, that was the conversation about the Arctic. Of course, because those audiences are private.
Right.
No recording, no, it's for private audience. But the idea for China is that the idea of the pipeline, which will deliver gas to China, but also to Europe.
Yeah.
Well, guess what now?
Mm.
With what's going on in Europe, that gas pipeline is going to just be redirected to China.
Yeah.
You might have Turkey get some of it. You might
Right.
get certain Eastern European countries,
Right.
because Russia, now what is going to Russia do? This dust on the Ukraine is going to settle one way or another.
Yeah, it absolutely
And
will.
you know what Russia is going to do?
Mm.
It's going to go back and start putting lines across the name of countries that,
Yeah.
that's how it's going to happen.
Yeah.
And what I mean by this, when it comes down to energy deliveries of gas and oil and so forth.
Mhm.
And this is where that pipeline comes in, because also the consumption of China,
Right.
it's not projected to be reduced anytime soon.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
only going to go up.
It's only going to go up.
So that is the reason why.
Yeah.
So to tie this to the idea of the new currency, just think about it.
Mhm.
If that massive amount of energy is being transacted with certain countries using the Chinese yuan, in that case, renminbi, or Russia could request the digital ruble,
Mhm.
you can just see where this is going.
Yeah.
So that's what prompted me to mention the term distribution of the geopolitical power.
Yeah.
That's what I meant by all that. So
Well, and I think that that's very interesting to focus on, because how much of our conflict around the world is about oil? How much of it has always been
it was always about
oil?
energy. Yeah, we went to Iraq because of energy.
Yep.
We took out Gaddafi because of energy, and now we are going to Africa because we want to limit certain movements as far as. Guys, is there any no question?
Oh wait,
one question.
we have a new member. Okay, so first, thank you to Fred Acosta. Thank you for your super sticker.
Thank you.
And then thank you to Tony Yin for becoming a YouTube channel member. When we hit 100 members, guys, we're gonna start doing live streams for you guys, like Q&A type live streams.
As a matter of fact, I do have a surprise for those members.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, I won't disclose it. That's the whole reason for why we call it surprise. And take my word for it. I don't sugarcoat things.
David does not.
I mean a surprise, because they will be the first to know about it.
What?
Yeah, not even the team here knows about it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I also don't know.
Nobody knows, and that's my promise. So the moment we reach that 100 members, and we'll do the Q&A session for the members, at the end, I'm gonna share that surprise. So
well, I'm very excited, guys. Let's get to 100 members, because I'd like to know the surprise too.
Yeah, literally, the team does not know. Nobody knows. So,
cool.
Well, guys, we hope you find this very informative, and we look forward to seeing you next time. As always, prepare yourself for a changing world order. Till next time, guys. Bye-bye.